Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark from the United States.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Mark from the States. How are we doing today? I am doing fantastic. I hope you are as well. Thank you so much for coming. What do you hear? What do you hear? Nothing. I've got a new chair. Rolls really nice now. No squeaking. Very happy. Come sit with me. Not in my new chair, but on this big fake couch that's right here. Today we're visiting back with Redcoat history. This video has come requested, so thank you so much. This is all the British Army ranks explained, in parentheses, during the Napoleonic era. I'm going to learn something today. Hopefully that you will too. Hopefully this is something that interests you. If you are interested in this channel and the content we are learning from today, I encourage you to get over there and visit Chris, who has given us his blessing. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you so much. Over to his channel, Redcoat History. There are two links below me. One that takes you right to the channel, and of course one that takes you to this video, so you don't have to listen to me. Right? If you want to listen to me, watch the original first, then come back, and that way you can help me. I'm asking you to watch the original first, then come over and then watch with me. And there's a lot I'm not going to understand today. I already know that going in. The structure and the ranks, and I couldn't even tell you how it really works here in my own country, let alone your country, and let alone hundreds of years ago. Hundreds of years ago. So we're talking about 1700, 1800s, and so I'm sure it's changed. The names have probably changed a lot over the time. I know a lot of groups have been amalgamated. It's always a tough word to say, but they've been joined together with budget cuts and so on, and shifting of things and needs and all that stuff. So I know it's probably a lot different now, but we're going to take a look at how it used to be. And this is just, of course, the British Army, not Navy or anything else. But so come sit with me. I appreciate you all hanging out with me today. It should be interesting. And I am going to learn something. You want to do it? All right, let's do it. Let's get out. There we are. Oh, and here he is. Let's do it.
Picture this. You're a young soldier in the British Army during the Napoleonic Wars. Your daily grind, grueling drills, iron discipline, and the looming shadow of battle. It was a hard, unforgiving life, but it was better than many of the other options available to Britain's poorest people. They got paid for a start in the army, not much, but they did get cash in their hand and food in their belly. Most of the time, anyway. Well, in today's video, we'll be looking at how much the men got paid and how much did it vary by regiment. You might be surprised. In this video, we'll also uncover the fascinating rank structure of the British Army, from the raw recruit to the lofty rank of colonel. What ranks were permanent, which ones temporary? And of course, for the fellow military history geeks out there, yeah, I'm looking at you, we'll take a butcher's at the insignia of both officers and men. What did all those epaulets and chevrons actually mean? Stick with me, we'll find out. Discover the pay gaps, the power struggles, and the surprising opportunities that let some NCOs leap into the officer class. This isn't just history, it's the gritty human story of life in the Napoleonic era army. By the way, talking of which, I'm off to Spain and Portugal soon to visit the battlefields of the Peninsular War. I'll be with my good friend Marcus Cribb, and we'll be walking the ground at places like Rolisa, Vimero, Busaco, Fuentes de Añoro, Salamanca and others. It's going to be brilliant, and you can be part of it. We're looking for sponsors. Donate about $20 and we'll raise a toast to you and thank you on camera in one of the videos. Any money we raise will go towards expenses and it'll be really appreciated. If that sounds good, then please go to ko-fi.com/redcoathistory. That's ko-fi.com/redcoathistory. fi.com/redcoathistory. You can make a donation there and let us know who to thank in the video. Anyway, back to today's film, and Steve Brown, author of all these brilliant books that are on screen now, started off by explaining to me the chain of command amongst the junior ranks.
I'll start at the bottom with the private. I think we all know what private was. Entry-level soldier. A lance
I think I can get private. That one I understand.
corporal was a temporary appointment to acting corporal, but not actually a rank, and the usage did vary between regiments.
Chosen man, to me!
Chosen man, which was a term used in various regiments, including the 95th, wasn't actually necessarily the same thing. It could be a permanent arrangement. So,
Temporary appointment to acting corporal, not a rank. Usage varied between regiments. Chosen man was not necessarily the same thing, was more of a permanent arrangement, and only some units used it. Interesting. Okay, that's Lance Corporal. Not a rank.
It was actually a license to wear one stripe, so to speak.
And a bit more pay, perhaps?
Actually, no, but I'll get to that.
Okay, fair enough.
It's a bit like the lieutenant. It's a bit like the lieutenant who has to act as a captain but be paid as a lieutenant.
Sounds like my job.
Applied. Yeah, exactly right. It's very common in the business world. Corporals were middle-ranking NCOs with two stripes. They were hopefully sergeants in waiting, and there was typically one of those per 19 privates, which makes up the squad of 20 men, which is the basic building block of battalions. Sergeants were the senior NCO rank in any company until July 1813, when, upon Wellington's recommendation, the rank of colour sergeant was introduced. And I'm really talking about infantry regiments here. There's a slightly different arrangement in the cavalry, which I can talk about in a second.
Yeah.
But sergeant was also the most common rank for staff sergeants or staff NCOs, such as the armour sergeant, the pay sergeant, the schoolmaster sergeant, etc., etc. The reason why cavalry regiments are different is that they had troop sergeant majors much earlier than the equivalent rank existed in the infantry. I think by 1813, cavalry regiments had troop sergeant majors for quite some time, and I think they came into play when they abolished the rank of troop quartermaster. And Wellington particularly pointed out that he wanted colour sergeants to be the equivalent of troop sergeant majors in the infantry battalions. But obviously they felt he couldn't call them sergeant majors because each battalion already had one sergeant major, so they came up with the name of colour sergeant, because the idea was a sort of an appeal to the heart, I guess. And amongst everything else, you're expected to look after the colours.
Yep.
And the good old sergeant major, there was one per battalion or one per troop, as I just mentioned in the cavalry, largely responsible for assisting the adjutant in discipline and training. I guess the modern equivalent would be an RSM, or Warrant Officer 1, and sergeant majors wore an officer's uniform, but 4 stripes, and carried the good old pace stick and the crimson sash. And this is apologies for C.F. Franklin for probably taking a bad photograph of what's in his book, but it was too good to not use. Just gives you some idea of what the rank stripes at the time looked like, and how they were worn on different arms, because as you can see in the battalion company, NCOs only wore ranks on their right arm, and in the flank companies they wore them on both arms.
Oh, okay. I was like, why do they have 2 rows? Okay, so one is one left arm, right arm. Gotcha. Well, I have to say the color sergeant has the best looking stripes there with the flag. I think that's pretty cool looking. Regiment of foot, battalion company, flank company, fusiliers, light infantry, rifles. Lance corporal or chosen man. So starting at the bottom is the lower of the rank. Okay, get that. Corporal, sergeant, 3, color sergeant. So in everything but battalion, you wear them on both arms. Oh, no, not in rifles. Rifles is only one arm, too. Interesting.
And in the rifles, then he wore them on one arm, I believe, according to the table. And the light infantry in the Fusiliers. So that provides a bit of clarity, perhaps,
Yes.
around what they look like.
We've talked about the NCOs, of course, but what role would they have had within the day-to-day life and the running of the regiment and so on?
On the drill square, a massive amount. Most company officers only really turned out to drill when they had special drill parades. Mostly the training was left to the NCOs and the adjutant, so that they would have been constantly present. The corporals would have been constantly present with their squads. The corporals messed with the men. Usually the sergeants, though, had their own mess. And one of the reasons for that, was because...
I'm sorry to keep pausing, but I just want to be able to read this. And it's going to be hard for me to understand just on first watch. It really is, and I apologize for my naivete. Study of 76 sergeants who served in the 145 foot for the period 1807 to 1815. 70% retained their rank for the rest of their military career. So 53 out of the 76, so 70%, wow, retained their rank. So they didn't go up or down, I'm assuming. 17 of them were demoted once. Okay, that's exactly what he meant. With most managing to regain their former rank. 8% were demoted twice. Ugh. Of those that retained their rank, 1 was commissioned. 11 went on to become color sergeant. 1 deserted. That's no good. 1 was, according to sources, a disgraced former officer who had re-enlisted as a private. That's got to be a bummer. But 11, 53 of them kind of just got their rank and stayed in that rank for that 8 years in this particular unit. Interesting. Okay.
There is evidence that discipline broke down when the sergeants were too close to the men. And in fact, Wellington bemoaned this very fact when the army discipline broke down after the Battle of Victoria, and he thought that the sergeants were too close to the men in terms of pay scale and familiarity, and then he needed to put a bit of distance between them, which is when he introduced the rank of colour sergeant.
And talking of pay scale, we've got that on screen now. What does this show us,
Yeah,
Steve?
that's just a thing that I stumbled across.
I do not understand
but it
this.
just shows typical rates of pay, which did actually increase between 1792 and 1829, which is nice to know. In fact, it probably 50% more, or even doubled in some instances. But it also shows the patheticness of the pay scale, because what we are saying here is that a private in the regular line infantry earned all of £9 2 shillings and 6pence a year.
Whoa, £9 in 1792 is equivalent in purchasing power to about 1,700 today. Okay. Is that for 365 days? Oh, that's for the year. Oh, that ain't great. I thought they were going to say monthly. But, I mean, it was something, right?
Whereas a sergeant major in the same regiment earned about 3 times as much. So obviously being a sergeant major is a very desirable thing to get, but there's only one of them for 1,000 men.
Yeah.
So you've got to work hard for that. And it also goes to show that if you were going to be either a private or an NCO, the place to aim towards is the Royal Horse Guards, because they do a whole lot better. A private in the Royal Horse Guards earns about 3 times what a private in the line infantry does, and They did pretty well as well, although you'll see there that the lifeguards and the Royal Horse Guards only have corporals, but because the Household Cavalry doesn't have any sergeants and never has. The senior NCO rank in the Horse Guards is a corporal.
So why was a private, for example, in the Royal Horse Guards or the Life Guards paid so much more than a private in an infantry regiment? What would
You
have
gotta
been the
ride a horse.
justification for that?
That's a very good question, actually. I've
You have
never
the
really
skill of riding a
contemplated
horse.
that. Certainly, the lifeguards could afford to be choosy about who they took, and they could be very picky about making sure that they chose a superior class of recruit, whereas the line infantry took more or less anyone that could walk and talk. They were expected to guard the life of the monarch, so they didn't just want anybody in the role, right?
There's
They
that.
wanted the best that they could get. And therefore, I think the pay scale were tilted towards attracting the best that they could get, or as many as they could get, so they could afford to be particularly choosy, and then train them to death. Because the Castle Cavalry rarely left London; it rarely went on campaign. It was guarding the monarch almost all the time.
I've got this study
Probably
on
a-
screen that you sent me.
Probably kind of a high desirable position too. I mean, you don't have to be going off to God knows where fighting. You're London based pretty much the whole time. Like I said, I think you have to have the extra skill of knowing how to be able to ride a horse and do it well. And yeah, they can be picky and choosy. Take the best of the best, I guess. Yeah, interesting. I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah, if I were, I wouldn't want to be out marching in Africa or anything like that. I would want to be at home for sure. That's interesting.
Almost all the time.
I've got this study on screen that you sent me of 76 sergeants who served in the 1st 45th, which you've done a book about, haven't you? The Nottingham.
That's right. Yeah, I did quite a lot of deep drilling on that particular unit, and they were fairly typical units. So these statistics will hold good across the board, I think. But once you reach the rank of sergeant, obviously you had the 3 stripes, and you're feeling pretty good about yourself. But you could be demoted at the drop of a hat for any misdemeanor, because there was pretty much a zero tolerance towards any of that. And of the 76 in the 45th who managed to make it up to sergeant, 70% of them retained the rank for the rest of the career, which is pretty good. But nearly a quarter were demoted once, and about 1 in 12 was demoted twice, but still managed to work their way back up again. And of those that retained their rank, 1 actually went on to be commissioned, 11 went on to become colour sergeant, which, as I mentioned, is the senior NCO in any infantry company. 1 actually deserted. And one of them was actually a disgraced junior officer in another regiment who re-enlisted as a private, and very rapidly worked his way back up to sergeant because he knew the rules.
Yeah.
What a great life story. Did you ever find out more about him?
I tried to do so. The source of the information was from a fairly reliable memoirist, and he described his name, and I was able to find the name of this particular sergeant. But then I tried to relate that name back to officers, and this particular officer was let go in the trenches before Badajoz for cowardice in April 1812. So I looked at the officers who had been let go across in all the regiments that had been present in 1812, and I couldn't find anyone who matched his name, which made me think he re-enlisted under a nom de plume.
That would make sense, I guess, if you're trying to hide from disgrace.
Cowardice,
one thing
yeah.
I'm surprised about, and you and I have talked about men being commissioned from the ranks before, is that only 1 was commissioned, because I know it was actually a lot more common than we think in those days. I think Rob Griffith was on once talking about the 5th 60th, and I think he said pretty much every senior sergeant in the 5th 60th ended up being promoted. But that number for the 45th seems fairly low.
Yeah, there was 1 out of 76. I hasten to add that the sergeant major that they took to the peninsula in late 1808, a fellow by the name of Oswald Pilling, who was wounded at Talavera, was also commissioned. So that, there was two.
Yeah.
For some reason, there is another individual who sticks in my mind, but I can't recall the circumstances, who may have been transferred to another regiment, then commissioned. So it was ultimately more than one.
Yeah.
And it sort of varied by regiment. Far and away, the regiments with the highest percentage of NCOs given commissions was the Foot Guard regiments, but never in the Foot Guards. They were always transferred to other regiments. And that wasn't necessarily class elitism, although there may have been a bit of that going on. But it was simply because that being an officer in the Foot Guards was so expensive, unless you had a huge private income, you almost couldn't sustain yourself. So it was kinder to send them to other regiments.
Yeah, I think I've come across one or two later on during the sort of Crimean War, I think, who were Scots Guards, and I think they ended up being moved to, like, the School of Musketry and things like that sort of thing.
That tended to happen more in the Victorian era, yes.
What?
Entry grade officer rank was either an ensign in the infantry or a cornet in the cavalry.
Officer chain.
More often than not, officers of this rank. And I should add here too that in the Fusilier regiments, they also had second lieutenant, which was an equivalent of an ensign. Ensigns.
Sorry, lowest commissioned rank. I just want to be able to read it before they move on. Officers usually only served a short time before promotion. I say lieutenant, you say lieutenant. Called second lieutenant. I'm trying to, so I don't sound naive and like a moron. And Fusilier regiments. Most junior officers in a company, but not employed in flank companies. Most junior officer in a company, but not employed. It's like, okay.
Usually
tough.
More often than not, only served for a fairly short time in the rank before being promoted to lieutenant. Typically 6 months. It was rare, from my observations in looking at hundreds of army lists, that they spent more than about 12 months in the rank. They were always the most junior officer in the company, but they were not allowed to be employed in flank companies. So flank companies had lieutenants and captains, but no ensigns. That was because of the specialist nature of what flank companies, the Grenadiers and the Light Company, did, and it was felt that ensigns were too junior to be on that duty.
Was it almost considered like a training position, essentially, being an ensign?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. You're coming into the army with, more often than not, no military
experience.
Whatsoever.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And in fact, it was not uncommon to see small troops of small ensigns being marched around the drill square by a 45-year-old sergeant major who was junior to them.
And I'm going a little bit off piste here, Steve, but I just thought it was interesting. Have you come across ensigns maybe being quietly let go when they've not quite lived up to scratch and not being promoted to lieutenant?
A lot.
Really?
Yeah, looking at army lists and the flow of ensigns in and out of a regiment, and it's amazing how many were resigned after only a couple of months in the job, which they were quite free to do. Privates couldn't resign at any time, but officers could.
Right.
So those who felt that the army wasn't quite all they thought it was going to be, didn't last very long, which is probably just as well, because you wouldn't want them anyway.
Yeah, I suspect many were encouraged to resign, but that would just be speculation.
It would be informed speculation, I would think.
Brilliant. Anyway, so sorry, we should move on to lieutenant, Steve.
Lieutenants are middle-ranking company grade officers. They were kind of the workhorse of the company, I guess. There was a couple of those for each company. Technically they were captains in waiting, but a lieutenant without opportunities, influence, or the ability to purchase could be in the role for quite a time, which was unfortunate, but that did happen. Commanders of companies or troops were always captains, and this was the lowest rank that had.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I really do. I'm just confused by without opportunities, influence of ability to purchase. You'll have to kind of shed some light. I was kind of waiting to see if they would comment on that. Maybe they will eventually. I don't know. But, can you... I know there's a lot of when you like the officers. There's a lot of wealthy people who can get positions because of their status in society. Um, are you able to buy the next rank? Is that what that means? You'll have to. I don't want to jump to conclusions here, but you'll have to let me know what that means.
Purchase could be in the role for quite a time, which was unfortunate, but that did happen. Commanders of companies or troops were always captains, and this was the lowest rank that had eligibility to be promoted by brevet, which is a communal uplift of an entire class of
Okay, the
officers to the
lowest
next
rank. Okay.
rank in the army, so that an officer could be a captain and brevet major. So as far as the regiment was concerned, he was a captain, but as far as the army was concerned, he was a major. But again, it's one of those things. He's paid as a captain, but could be asked to do duty as a major. This theme
Interesting.
keeps recurring.
Yeah.
Major was usually the second in command of a battalion or commander of part of a battalion, i.e. a wing. It was not uncommon for lieutenant colonels to split the regiments up on campaign or on the battlefield into wings. And of course, the major was also there to command the battalion if the lieutenant colonel goes down or is not present. And you'll be surprised at how many majors were commanding battalions at a lot of Wellington's major actions, quite a few.
Yeah.
A lieutenant colonel was normally the substantive commander of a battalion in the infantry or the regiment within the cavalry, and it was the highest possible regimental rank. You then get to the lofty heights of colonel, which was not a regimental rank. Officers or lieutenant colonels were promoted to this rank by brevet or by special merit. And colonels were seen as being generals in waiting, and they were often seconded to staff rather than regimental duties. They could also be appointed to brigadier general, which was at the time not a rank. It was a title, and it was a temporary, and it was only for the duration. So a colonel or even a lieutenant colonel could be a brigadier general on a specific campaign, but the minute
Okay. So it's like for this, like you said, this campaign, we can boost you up. It's just a title. I was like trying to wrap my head around this. Like, so you're just getting a title? But I mean, I've heard of brigadier general. I always thought that was like the next step past general, but maybe maybe there is no such thing. But it's confusing. It really is confusing. I'm going to go back. So
colonel or even a lieutenant colonel could be a brigadier general on a specific campaign, but the minute they leave the theatre of war, they're back to being a lieutenant colonel again.
Yeah.
And again, apologies to
okay.
C.F. Franklin, but this was by far and away the best image I could find of all the various rank designators within the officer corps. Lieutenants and ensigns only had the single epaulet, which was.
So what are these that I'm looking at? Are these what's on the shoulder? Epaulet? What do you call those epaulets? Interesting. Okay.
Usually on the right shoulder. Captains also, it was obviously very hard to tell ensigns, lieutenants, and captains apart.
Yeah.
With the
yeah.
That's the way it was. The field officers had typical epaulets with a slight variance in the actual pip, if you like. Well, they weren't actually pips at the time. They were either, I think, Star of the Garter or the Crown to help you designate which brand of officer you were referring to. So that was your typical designation for the various officer classes.
I think modern pips are probably a bit easier to decipher. I'm sort of looking at this a tiny bit lost.
The adjutant is perhaps
I'm glad I'm not alone
because he's got the single flap on the left shoulder, in addition to the epaulet on the right. But ensign, lieutenant, and captain are all the same.
Makes sense to you? Good, because I got a bit lost. Steve, friend of the show, will be back again soon. And I'll be back next week, of course, with another slice of British military history. I'll see you then.
Oh, we're done. Okay. Interesting. Okay, that's the end of the video. It was interesting. It was definitely confusing, especially with the shoulder. What do you call those? Epaulets? Epaulets, I think is what those were called. They looked identical. A lot of them looked identical, and you have to be in the system to really kind of to know. But I really dig the stripes and the color sergeant one with the flag. I thought that one would be pretty cool to sport on your sleeve for sure. And then the pay scale, and what doesn't seem like a lot of money, but for someone who doesn't have any, I guess. But the interesting fact is you can choose to leave if you were an officer, not so much if you were infantry. And definitely you would want to be a part of the house guard, right? Or horse guard. Sorry. At least for me, I think I would rather be protecting the monarch back home than out, in some far-flung places. But yeah, interesting video. Go, please, if you have one like and one subscription to give today, please go give it to Chris over at Redcoat History. It is a wonderful channel. I get a lot of videos from him requested, so I appreciate it. And please, let's go and support him for sure. Interesting. I'd be interested to know what ranks are still around, if they're all still here. I imagine they probably are in some way or another. And maybe do a companion video of what the modern Army ranking system is. And again, I was confused on, I don't know if confused, but I think I have it when they were talking about the officer, if you had the means that you could get higher ranks, get promoted. I know back then, right, a lot of it was based on status, and you could kind of buy your way in a way. Let me know if I'm totally off base there or if I am right. I know a lot of you have history in the military, and for that I say thank you so much for your service. And then there's also a lot of you who are interested in that sort of thing, so you have a lot of knowledge as well. And like I've always said, I do get my initial learning from the video, but I get the bulk of it is after in the comments and in emails, when a lot of you can help me and continue the discussion and break things down for me. Thank you so much for coming. I hope everybody is happy, healthy, and safe. You're all just wonderful people. I hope you know that. And you make our channel what it is. Just a special place to come and hang out. Take care, buddy. And we'll see you in the next one. All right. Bye-bye.
Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark. And